When the stars went silent, Dr. Alina Rodriguez pushed her glasses up her nose as she stared at the impossible data scrolling across her monitor. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to look away from the readings. Something was very wrong in the galaxy, and she was the first person to notice it. The Deep Space Observatory on Luna had been humanity's eye into the cosmos for over 50 years. Alina had spent the last decade cataloging radio signals, analyzing stellar patterns, and mapping the communications networks of dozens of alien civilizations. She knew the galaxy's rhythm like a musician knows their favorite song. But now, that rhythm was breaking down. Computer, display stellar communication. Map, Sector 7 Alpha through 12 Gamma, she commanded. The holographic display materialized above her desk, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim. What she saw made her stomach drop. Where once bright nodes of light had indicated active civilizations, now there was only darkness. The Helix Consortium, gone. The Mineral Lords of Kepler, 442, silent. The massive trade networks that had buzzed with constant chatter for centuries had simply vanished over the past. 6 months, Elena's hands trembled as she expanded the search parameters. The pattern became clearer with each system she examined. Whatever was happening, it was moving in a spiral pattern toward the galaxy's center, toward Earth. She grabbed her secure communication device and called the one person who would understand the implications immediately. Director Sarah Kim answered on the first ring, her voice sharp with the alertness of someone who never truly slept. Alina, it's 3 a.m. This better be important. Sarah, we have a problem, a big one. How quickly can you get to the observatory? 30 minutes later, Director Kim stood beside Elena's workstation, her face pale in the blue glow of the holographic display. She was a former military officer who had seen combat in the border conflicts with the aggressive Zephyrian Empire. Nothing usually rattled her, but this was different. How many civilizations? Kim asked quietly. 17 confirmed, possibly. 23, Alina replied. All of them went silent within a 6-month period, starting from the outer rim and moving inward. The pattern is too organized to be natural disasters or internal conflicts. Kim studied the display, her tactical mind processing the implications. What about the coalition species? The Cathara, the Vorthan Alliance, the Crystal Singers? Alina manipulated the display, zooming in on several systems closer to the galactic core. Still active, but their communication patterns have changed. There's a lot more military chatter, emergency frequencies, calls for help. They know something's coming. As if summoned by their conversation, the observatory's long-range communication array suddenly came alive with an incoming transmission. The signal was strong, broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Someone was very desperate to be heard. Incoming transmission from the Cathara system, the automated system announced. Priority Alpha, requesting immediate response. Alina and Kim exchanged glances. The Cathara were known throughout the galaxy as master diplomats, a species that had never been at war with anyone. If they were calling for help, the situation was worse than either human had imagined. Open the channel, Kim ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the image of a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. Alina recognized the species immediately. This was a Cathara ambassador, probably based on the intricate crystalline jewelry adorning their elongated neck. Greetings, beings of Earth, the aliens said, their voice carrying harmonics that made the words seem to sing. I am Ambassador Zareth of the Kithara Coalition. We are transmitting this message to all known spacefaring species in the galaxy. We face an enemy unlike any we have encountered before. The image shifted to show space-based sensor readings. Massive geometric shapes moved through the void, each one the size of a small moon. They weren't ships in any conventional sense. They looked more like living crystals, growing and shifting as they moved. They call themselves the Devourers, Zaroth continued. They arrived at the Rim World 6 months ago, and they leave nothing behind. No survivors, no wreckage, no trace that civilizations ever existed. Our scientists believe they are an ancient machine intelligence that consumes matter and energy to fuel their expansion. Alina felt her blood turn to ice as she watched the sensor data. These weren't conquerors or raiders, they were harvesters, treating entire civilizations like crops to be consumed. The outer rim is gone. Zaroth's voice carried notes of despair that needed no translation. 47 known. Civilizations, billions of souls, all consumed. Our combined fleets have engaged them 3 times. We have lost every battle. They learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics faster than we can develop new strategies. The ambassador's image returned to the screen, and Alina could see the fear in those large eyes. We know of Earth's reputation. We know humans are called Deathworlders by some species, that you come from a planet so dangerous it forged you into warriors. We also know you have conflicts with some of our member species, but we are desperate. The Devourers will reach the core worlds within 1 standard galactic year. After that, they will consume everything, including your world. Kim stepped forward, her military bearing evident even in this impossible situation. This is Director Sarah Kim of Earth's Deep Space Command. Ambassador Zerath, what kind of fleet are we talking about? How many ships? The alien's expression shifted to what might have been hope. Our long-range scouts report approximately 800 Devourer vessels, ranging from fighter-sized units. 2 massive command ships. They move as a coordinated swarm, consuming resources from each system to build more ships. By the time they reach Earth, their numbers could be in the thousands. Alina did quick calculations in her head. Earth's entire space navy consisted of maybe 300 ships, and most of those were designed for patrol duty or fighting other organic species. They had never faced an enemy like this, but Kim's expression was shifting from concern to something else, something that reminded Alina why humans were called Deathworlders in the first place. Ambassador, we'll need complete tactical data on every engagement your forces have had with these Devourers. Ship specifications, weapon effectiveness, behavioral patterns, everything. And we'll need it within 24 hours. You're going to help us? Zaroth asked, disbelief clear in their harmonic voice. Kim smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Ambassador, you need to understand something about humans. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting things that wanted to kill us. Our planet tried to kill us. Our weather tried to kill us. Our wildlife tried to kill us, and we survived it all. These Devourers think they can harvest the galaxy like it's their private garden. They're about to discover what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species. 12 hours later, Admiral Marcus Chen stood in the command center of Earth's primary military space station, surrounded by the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced. The walls displayed tactical information about the Devourer threat, and every piece of data made the situation look more impossible. Chen was a veteran of the Zephyrian conflicts, a man who had earned his rank through tactical brilliance and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. His grey hair and weathered face told the story of a lifetime spent protecting humanity from threats most civilians never knew existed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the assembled officers, "we're looking at an extinction-level event, not just for us, but for every organic species in the galaxy. The politicians are still debating whether we should get involved, but I've already made the decision. We're going to war." General Patricia Vos, head of the Marine Space Combat Division, spoke up first. "Admiral, with respect, our entire fleet is designed for fighting other organic species. We've never faced a true machine intelligence, especially not one this advanced." Chen nodded. "That's exactly why we're going to win, General. These devourers have been fighting organic species for months, maybe years. They've learned to counter conventional tactics, standard ship movements, predictable strategies, but they've never fought humans." He gestured to the tactical display showing Earth's fleet composition. "Every species in the galaxy thinks theirs a right way to fight a space battle. Formation flying, coordinated attacks, logical, tactical decisions. They all follow the same basic principles they learned from studying each other." Colonel James Wright, the fleet's chief strategic officer, CA*. Colonel James Wright, the fleet's chief strategic officer, caught on immediately. "But humans learned to fight on Earth. We learned from chaos." "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "Our tactics evolved from 10,000 years of warfare on a world where the environment itself was trying to kill us. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to fight dirty when necessary. These machine intelligences are expecting logical opponents. They're about to face something completely different." Dr. Rebecca Santos, the fleet's xenobiology expert, pulled up files on human military history. "The Devourers have probably analyzed every recorded battle in galactic history. They know how the Cathara fight, how the Crystal Singers coordinate their attacks, how the Vorthon use their numerical advantages. But they've never studied human warfare because we've been too isolated, too small a presence in galactic politics." Chen smiled grimly. "Which means they have no idea what's coming. They're expecting another civilized species that follows the established rules of engagement. Instead, they're getting Deathworlders who learned their tactics from surviving ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and predators that could kill us with a single bite." The assembly began to buzz with excitement as the implications became clear. For the first time in the briefing, they weren't talking about survival, they were talking about victory. "What's our timeline, Admiral?" asked Captain Lisa Park, one of the youngest ship commanders in the fleet. "The Devourers are currently engaging Cathara forces at the Proxima Centauri of their system. Our intelligence suggests they'll break through within 2 weeks. After that, they have a clear path to the core worlds." Chen paused, looking around the room at faces that represented humanity's best and brightest military minds. "We're going to assemble the largest fleet in human history. Every combat-capable ship, every experimental weapon system, every piece of military technology we've developed in the past century. We're going to the Cathara system, and we're going to show the galaxy why Earth is called a..." The next week, space around Earth became a hive of activity unlike anything in human history. Ships arrived from every human colony, from military bases scattered across a dozen star systems. The massive construction yards of Mars worked round the clock, converting civilian vessels into fighting ships and rushing experimental weapons into production. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and largest battleship. Through the massive viewing ports, he could see the assembled fleet stretching as far as the eye could see. 200 ships of every size and class, from massive dreadnoughts to small, fast attack craft. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Admiral, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Commander David Torres, we're receiving final fleet readiness reports. All ships report ready for departure. Chen nodded, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving the Cathara, or even about protecting Earth. This was about proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars, that the species from the dangerous little world called Earth could stand against any threat the universe could produce. Open a channel to all ships, he ordered. The main screen activated, and Chen knew his image was being broadcast to every human crew member in the fleet. Nearly 50,000 people, all willing to risk everything for a species most of them had never met, to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying across space to every ship in the formation. We stand at a moment that will define not just our future, but the future of every living being in the galaxy. The Devourers think they can harvest the galaxy like farmers harvesting grain. They think we're just another species to be consumed. He paused, looking out at the fleet that represented everything humanity could bring to bear. They're wrong. We are the children of a death world, forged by millions of years of surviving the impossible. We are the species that looked at a hostile universe had decided to explore it anyway. We are humanity, and today we're going to remind the galaxy why that name is spoken with respect. The fleet began to move, 200 ships accelerating toward the edge of the solar system where they would engage their faster-than-light drives. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, while ahead lay the unknown and the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. As the stars began to shift and stretch around them, Admiral Chen allowed himself one last thought. About Earth. About the blue and green world that had given birth to a species crazy enough to fight impossible odds and stubborn enough to win. The Devourers were about to discover what it meant to face humanity. The last stand at Kithara Prime. Human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Cathara system, and what Admiral Chen saw through the main view screen made him understand why every previous battle against the Devourers had ended in defeat. The enemy wasn't just a fleet, it was a geometric nightmare made manifest in space. Hundreds of crystalline structures moved through the void, each one pulsing with internal energy that seemed to bend light around them. They ranged from small pyramid shapes, the size of fighters, to massive constructs that dwarfed human dreadnoughts. Most disturbing of all, they moved with perfect coordination, as if guided by a single vast intelligence. "My God," whispered Dr. Santos from her position at the science station. "They're not just ships. They're nodes in a single distributed consciousness. Each one shares information instantaneously with all the others." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, noting how the Devourer fleet had positioned itself around Kithara Prime, the Coalition's capital world. The planet's surface showed the scars of bombardment, but it was still fighting. Defensive installations continued to fire while evacuation. Ships struggled to escape the planet's gravity well under covering fire from the remaining Cathara defense fleet. "Communications," Chen ordered. "Get me Ambassador Zaroth." The main screen flickered, showing the interior of what was obviously a military command bunker. Ambassador Zaroth appeared, but they looked nothing like the composed diplomat from the previous transmission. Their silver skin was dulled with exhaustion, and their harmonious voice carried overtones of despair. "Admiral Chen," the ambassador said, "I did not expect to see you again. We are grateful that humanity answered our call, but I fear you have arrived too late. Our combined fleet has been reduced to less than 30 vessels. The Devourers learn from every engagement. They adapted to our tactics faster than we could develop new ones. Chen nodded grimly. Ambassador, we need you to order all surviving Cathara ships to fall back to minimum safe distance. What we're about to do is going to look very strange, and we don't want any friendly fire incidents. Zareth's large eyes widened with something that might have been hope. You have a plan. We have something better, Chen replied with a smile that would have been familiar to any student of human military history. We have chaos. As the Cathara ships pulled back, the human fleet began to do something that violated every principle of space combat tactics known to galactic civilization. Instead of maintaining formation and coordinating their approach, the human ships scattered in what looked like complete disorder. Individual vessels accelerated on seemingly random vectors, some diving toward the planet's surface, while others climbed away from the system's ecliptic plane. A few ships appeared to be heading directly away from the battle, as if their crews had panicked and were trying to flee. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction as the Devourer fleet began to respond to the human approach. The crystalline ships moved to intercept what they calculated as the most logical attack vectors, positioning themselves to counter coordinated assault patterns that never materialized. Colonel Wright, Chen addressed his tactical officer. What's the enemy doing? Wright studied his instruments, a grin spreading across his face. Exactly what we predicted, sir. They're analyzing our approach patterns and calculating optimal intercept courses based on standard tactical doctrine. They have no idea what we're actually doing. What the humans were actually doing was implementing a battle plan that would have been impossible for any other species in the galaxy, called controlled chaos. It had been developed by studying Earth's most successful military campaigns, battles, where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through unpredictability and improvisation. Every human ship captain had been given a set of general objectives, but complete freedom to achieve them however they saw fit. There was no grand coordination, no rigid formation to maintain. Instead, each crew was encouraged to be creative, to take risks, to do things that would surprise not just the enemy but their own allies. Captain Sarah Mitchell of the destroyer Hughes Hurricane had been a fighter pilot before transferring to ship command. She took her vessel into a screaming dive toward Cathara Prime's largest moon, using the gravity well to slingshot around the satellite at velocities that pushed her ship's structural limits. The maneuver brought her out behind a cluster of Devourer ships that had been positioned to intercept what their calculations said should have been a standard flanking attack. Phase 2 of the human battle plan was even more unconventional than the opening assault. Instead of continuing to engage the enemy directly, the human fleet began what looked like a retreat. Ships that had been attacking suddenly broke off and fled at maximum acceleration, broadcasting what appeared to be desperate calls for evacuation. The Devourer intelligence, analyzing the human behavior, concluded that the attack had failed and began to pursue what it calculated as a broken enemy force. The crystalline ships accelerated after the fleeing humans, moving into a pursuit formation that would allow them to systematically hunt down and consume the retreating vessels. It was exactly what Admiral Chen had hoped they would do. Now, he said quietly into his communicator, hidden among the asteroids of the system's outer belt, 30 human ships that had been powered down and invisible to enemy sensors suddenly came online. These were the fleet's heavy assault vessels, loaded with humanity's most powerful weapons and positioned during the initial chaos of the battle. As the Devourer pursuit formation passed through their firing zone, the hidden ships opened up with everything they had: plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles, and exotic weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy turned the void into a blazing inferno of destruction. The Devourers found themselves caught between the fleeing human ships, which had suddenly turned to fight again, and the ambush force that had appeared from nowhere. Worse, their pursuit formation was optimized for chasing scattered enemies, not for defending against coordinated fire from multiple directions. For the first time in the battle, the machine intelligence showed something that might have been confusion. Its calculations had been perfect, its analysis of human behavior had been logical, but the results were completely different from what it had predicted. "They're trying to adapt," reported Dr. Santos, monitoring the enemy communications. "Frequencies. I'm detecting massive data exchanges between their ships. They're trying to understand what we're doing." "Too late," Admiral Chen replied with satisfaction. "The problem with being a machine intelligence is that you think everything can be calculated. But you can't calculate chaos, and you can't predict what someone will do when they're willing to die for something they believe in." The tide of the battle was turning. Human losses had been heavy. Nearly a quarter of the fleet had been destroyed or severely damaged, but Devourer casualties were mounting even faster. More importantly, the machine intelligence was beginning to show signs of systematic breakdown, as its logical processes failed to cope with truly irrational enemy behavior. "Admiral," called Captain Park from her assault cruiser, "I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the primary Devourer command vessel. Whatever they use for central coordination seems to be overloading." Chen smiled grimly. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel. If we can disrupt their coordination, the rest of the fleet becomes just individual ships instead of a unified force." The human fleet converged on the massive crystalline construct at the center of the Devourer formation. It was easily 10 times larger than the biggest human ship, pulsing with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it was also the key to everything, the node that coordinated the entire machine intelligence. The final assault was brutal and chaotic, with human ships throwing themselves against the command vessel's defenses with a desperation that bordered on madness. Several vessels were destroyed by the construct's powerful weapons, but each loss brought the survivors closer to their target. Captain Lisa Park's ship was among the first to reach firing range. Her assault cruiser's main batteries opened fire at point-blank range, pouring concentrated plasma into the crystalline hull. Other ships joined the assault, and gradually, incredibly, cracks began to appear in the seemingly invincible construct. "This is it," Chen announced to the fleet. "Everything we have, everything we are. Show them why humanity doesn't surrender." The concentrated firepower of dozens of human vessels finally overwhelmed the command construct's defenses. The crystalline structure began to collapse in on itself, its energy patterns fluctuating wildly as the intelligence that had coordinated the entire Devourer fleet began to die. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Remaining Devourer ships, suddenly cut off from their central coordination, began to behave erratically. Some continued fighting, but others seemed to drift aimlessly, as if they had forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. "All ships," Admiral Chen broadcast, "finish them off. Don't give them time to establish new coordination protocols." The final phase of the battle was almost anticlimactic. Without their central intelligence to coordinate them, the individual Devourer constructs fell easily to focused human attacks. Within an hour, the last enemy vessel had been destroyed, leaving only debris and the impossible sight of a human fleet, victorious against an enemy that had never been defeated. On the surface of Cathara Prime, Ambassador Zaroth stood in the ruins of their command center, staring at the tactical display that showed human ships moving to rescue Cathara survivors and provide medical aid. Around them, their staff worked frantically to coordinate relief efforts, but the ambassador remained motionless, trying to process what they had witnessed. "Ambassador," came Admiral Chen's voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Chen of the human fleet. The Devourers have been neutralized. We're standing by to provide any assistance you need." Zaroth finally found their voice, though the harmonics carried overtones of awe and disbelief. "Admiral, in all our history, we have never seen anything like what your people accomplished here today. The Devourers were supposed to be invincible. They had consumed dozens of civilizations, defeated every fleet sent against them. How did you know you could win?" Chun's image appeared on the screen, and for the first time since the battle began, he looked tired. The weight of command and the losses his fleet had taken were evident in his weathered features. "Ambassador, we didn't know if we could win, but we knew something else. We knew we couldn't afford to lose. Everything in the galaxy was at stake. When a Death World species is backed into a corner with nowhere to run, we become very dangerous." Over the following weeks, as rescue and repair operations continued throughout the Cathara system, the implications of the human victory began to resonate throughout the galaxy. Word spread quickly that the invincible Devourers had been defeated, not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by tactical innovation and sheer bloody-minded determination. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly wanted to know everything about the strange beings from the dangerous world called Earth. Diplomats arrived to establish formal relations. Military officers came to study human tactics, and scientists wanted to understand how a relatively primitive species had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest civilizations could not. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humans saw themselves. For the first time in their history, they were not just another small species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. They were the beings who had faced extinction and chosen to fight instead of flee, who had saved countless worlds and proven that sometimes chaos and creativity were more powerful than logic and calculation. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, looking out at the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels working together to rebuild the Cathara system. In the distance, construction ships were already beginning work on new defensive stations, but this time they would be built with human tactical doctrine in mind. "Quite a view," said Ambassador Zaroth, approaching from behind with their characteristic harmonious voice. Chen turned to face the alien diplomat, noting how different they looked from the desperate being who had first called for help. There was hope in those large eyes now, and something else, respect. "It's the view of a new future," Chen replied. "The Devourers are gone, but there will be other threats. Next time, the galaxy will be ready for them." Zaroth nodded, their crystalline jewelry chiming softly with the movement. "The Cathara Coalition has voted to offer humanity full membership, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Several other species are preparing similar offers. Whether you intended it or not, Admiral, you have changed the balance of power in the galaxy." Chen smiled, remembering his conversation with the fleet before they left Earth. "We came here to save the galaxy, Ambassador. Looks like we saved ourselves in the process." As the two beings, one alien and one human, stood watching the work of reconstruction. Neither could have imagined that this moment would later be remembered as the beginning of a new age. An age where humanity took its place, not as conquerors or rulers, but as the galaxy's protectors, the species that would stand against any threat and fight impossible battles because someone had to. The children of Earth had found their purpose among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.